Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. It's been 4 years since India and China have been locked in a tense standoff on the line of actual control in Ladakh in particular, but also all along the northern frontier that India has with Tibet, which of course means with China. Apart from that, India and China are locked in a fierce contest for influence in India's neighbourhood, or what is also known as South Asia. How is that panning out, and what are the challenges that India faces from China and the other parts of the world or other aspects of global relationships when India and China contest elsewhere, is the subject of this week's Simply Nitin. I am Nitin Gokhale. So, for almost 2 decades now, China has been making steady inroads into India's immediate neighbourhood, or what is called the Indian subcontinent. In some quarters, this is also known as South Asia, which comprises countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Pakistan of course, and Afghanistan. Pakistan is a special case. For almost a quarter of a century now, Pakistan can be termed as China's province, more or less, because it helps Pakistan in every aspect possible, in every relation to every economic development, defense, and also trying to bail out Pakistan from its economic difficulties for quite some time. So that's a different case, but all other neighbors around India have also had up and down relationship with China, and of course they have blown hot and cold with India, depending on the geopolitical situation, depending on the political situation, and have tried to play one against the other. The best example of that comes in Kathmandu or Nepal, where India used to have influence until the Chinese started upping their ante in Nepal, and today it is the alternate between the kind of governments that come in Kathmandu or assume power in Kathmandu, alternate between India and China. That's because China has deep pockets. It gives loans on easy terms, also has predatory tactics in terms of acquiring projects and then building them and maybe granting them to these countries starved of resources. The elite in these countries, Nepal or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, Maldives, have also perfected the art of playing one against the other. And this is where India's main challenge comes, apart from what is happening physically on the land border and of course in the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean region and of course the larger Indo-Pacific. But let's take some specific examples. The competition between India and China in the non-kinetic domain is really in 3 fields. The fields of infrastructure, finance and connectivity. So, as most of you know, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative in 2017, which they wanted to utilize their excess capacity in terms of finances as well as infrastructure building for countries around its neighbourhood, India's neighbourhood, and of course connecting it to the larger geographical area of Eurasia and then Europe. India and Bhutan, India's closest ally in South Asia, refused to join the Belt and Road Initiative, which was announced in 2017 because India felt that the entire scheme was more political in nature and strategic in nature rather than economic in nature. It was not about development, it was more about acquiring influence in many countries. The China-Pakistan economic corridor, for instance, could be useful for China to overcome its Malacca dilemma, which means all the energy resources it brings from the Gulf countries and elsewhere in the world go through the narrow straits of Malacca and which can be choked. So China is always looking for an alternate route which they were trying to build through Pakistan, through Gwadar port and going through the heart of Pakistan and coming through Gilgit-Baltistan and then going to the Xinjiang province of China. But India objected to it because India said Gilgit-Baltistan and the northern areas of Pakistan are rightfully, legally India's. And without consulting India, China was trying to build the China-Pak economic corridor. So that's the strategic nature of these projects. Look at Sri Lanka, what happened where China recklessly gave loans, and the elites there, the decision makers, the Rajapaksa brothers, the families of elite politicians, everyone took up these projects because they meant benefits to political parties, to the governments, but ultimately the debt was too heavy for Sri Lanka to pay back, and China of course then acquired controlling rights over the Hambantota port, for instance, which has been leased to China for 99 years, which has been a major bugbear for Indian interest in the Indian Ocean region because it overlooks the strategic sea lanes of communication. That said, many other points that can be talked about, but of late, since 2018, India is pushing back against China's relentless drive to acquire disproportionate influence in South Asia or in the Indian neighbourhood. So what is India doing? India is actually pushing back against the marauding Chinese who are relentlessly pushing for disproportionate influence in the Indian subcontinent. And to counter that, India has been quietly working in various aspects, various fields, and in various ways. So the Ministry of External Affairs of India has opened some different credit lines to 5 different countries in the Indian subcontinent, and they are Nepal, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Maldives. And all of this, the total 37 lines of credit actually amount to something like $14 billion, covering 162 projects in these countries spread out across the Indian subcontinent or in the Indian neighbourhood. The projects comprise of energy, storage, energy transportation, also has the connectivity projects like in Sri Lanka to India or India to Myanmar and further. Nepal, a number of hydroelectric projects India has done and is doing. India is also guaranteed to purchase power from Nepal. It has started a railway line to Nepal, for instance. So 2 or 3 major highlights one can talk about is India has given a line of credit of $8 billion to Dhaka or to Bangladesh to execute different projects, and these are very concessional rates at which the loans are granted. $4 billion to Sri Lanka during its worst days of distress in 2022. Without batting an eyelid, India gave it when it was needed, while China deterred and waited and deferred its help, if at all they gave it. In fact, they held back sanction for an IMF loan to Sri Lanka. And if India had not come to Sri Lanka's help, perhaps the Sri Lankan nation and the society would have collapsed further. But India's timely help has allowed Sri Lanka to tide over the worst economic crisis in its history. And therefore, of course, other projects have now come to fruition in Sri Lanka. The implications, of course, are various. If you look at some of the projects that India does for the smaller countries, there is the bridge in Malé, which actually facilitates connectivity between 2 islands to the capital of Maldives, which is Malé. Also, India has offered now the latest one. If there are 2 visits that have happened this week, earlier this week. One is the Foreign Minister of Maldives was in New Delhi to meet his counterpart Dr. S. Jaishankar in India, who talked about how the dependence or interdependence that the 2 countries have can actually be the bridge, despite recent tensions in the relationship where Maldives president, newly elected Maldives president, actually ordered some of the military personnel who were there for maintenance support to the fleet of Dorniers and helicopters stationed in Maldives to go back to India or come back to India. And yet India continues to give assistance and help to Maldives, because India understands the political compulsions that these parties, smaller parties and smaller nations have, like it has happened in Maldives. Something similar, the Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra was in Dhaka, where he met Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. And Bangladesh is one of India's closest partners in South Asia. But Bangladesh has also smartly played the game of playing one against the other, India and China for instance. It has nearly 60% of its military hardware comes from China. For instance, two old submarines, two submarines, albeit old, are in the Bangladeshi Navy, which are of Chinese origin. And in fact, the BNS or Bangladesh Naval Station Sheikh Hasina in Pekua, near Cox's Bazar, has been opened recently by Bangladesh, which has the capacity to station or house 6 submarines. Now, Bangladesh doesn't have the need or necessity to have 6 submarines. It does not have the financial wherewithal either. So there are these questions are always there in Indian security establishment's mind, that why is Bangladesh building this submarine base? But that notwithstanding, Foreign Secretary Quatra's visit to Dhaka had a couple of positive takeaways. The Bangladesh Foreign Minister spoke about how India has offered to help in building a reservoir of Tista water on the Bangladesh side. Of course, that dispute or the problem of sharing Tista water still remains between India and Bangladesh. But in many other ways, India helps Bangladesh, and the trade ties are always on the upswing. Connectivity has improved over the past 10 to 15 years. That has happened. Sri Lanka, I have spoken about. Maldives, similar story. Nepal, absolutely similar story. And Bhutan continues to be supported majorly by India, despite the fact that in 6 months down the line, or in 6 months' time or 8 months' time, China and Bhutan may sign a boundary agreement going forward, which will have implications for India. But hopefully and most probably, because of the close ties, Bhutan has assured India that it will not harm India's security interest. In fact, that is the common theme all these leaders speak about when you speak to them. Prime Minister or President Ranil Wickremesinghe now, or the Bhutan King, or the Bangladeshi decision makers, including Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, they in various public speeches, statements and in private talks continue to assure, or at least pay lip service to the fact that none of these countries want to harm India's security interest, which is what happens in India's mind when Chinese presence is so close to its territories, to its borders. The spy ship or the survey ship which China sends to Indian Ocean, and especially in its neighbourhood, near its territorial waters. Although in international waters these ships are parked, or they come to Sri Lanka and Maldives, the fact is they are designed and they are intended to spy on India's atomic program, India's defence establishments, and therefore India has these concerns about the neighbourhood. Myanmar, after the military junta staged a coup in 2021, China has now iron grip over the Myanmar administration or the government, and India continues to battle the setback, or has an uphill task in trying to keep balance in their relationship with Myanmar. So something similar is going to happen. There's going to be no let-up as far as India-China rivalry is concerned. While we mostly focus on the land boundary dispute between India and China, the tension on the eastern Ladakh line of actual control, and the standoff and the heavy deployment of forces that have been happening, the fact is China and India compete in many different ways. I have not even spoken about what happens in the Western Indian Ocean, for instance. In the Indian Ocean region, 5 different countries in the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Seychelles, Mauritius and Comoros, are the playing ground, or a new playground for a battle between India and China. And yet, India hasn't had a full-time embassy in places like Comoros or in the Vanilla Islands, as they are called, in the Indian Ocean region or southwestern Indian Ocean region. Chinese have had a big presence and a long presence in these countries because they are aware of the importance of these island nations. They may be small and big, like Mauritius is bigger than Seychelles, but Seychelles is also very strategically placed. Mozambique Channel, for instance, is important for India as well as for China. So India has actually tried to up its game in these areas also. So not that China has a free run or a free pass in the areas around India, but the fact is it is going to be an intense competition going forward, apart from what directly impacts the India-China relationship is the tension between the two sides. That's what I wanted to flag to you this time when we are observing or completing 4 years of the standoff on the land border along the Himalayas. But this is not one-dimensional battle. It is a multi-dimensional war that India and China are fighting, and India has to be nimble-footed, India has to be quick in its thinking and has to respond in double quick time than it has done before. Another playground of the battle between the two Asian giants is Africa, about which we can talk about in a separate episode. But this is something that I thought I will flag to you. Do read various papers and various studies that have been done in Rand Corporation, in Carnegie Endowment, in Brookings, or in Indian think tanks about the intense competition between India and China in India's immediate neighbourhood. That's all I have this week. Do keep watching StratNewsGlobal, and of course keep sending us feedback. You know where to reach us. Your comments are precious, and we will of course continue to bring you different aspects of India's foreign policy, strategic issues and the defense sector. For the time being, it's goodbye.